Bill Maher seems to be at his wit's end. Why, it may be the man is on the verge of a breakthrough. Not only are we getting another story about Bill Maher criticizing the left, but this time he's going through that period so many of us went through where he's like, people keep telling me I criticize the left too much. Well, it's because the left is embarrassing me and they're doing these things. And it's like, yo, Bill, been there, done that. Glad to see you finally paying attention. It took you a long time. But I can respect you coming out and criticizing the breakdown and the insanity of the left. The only problem, Bill, is that you got whipped up by the mainstream fervor and lies. And because of that, it took you a long time. But you know what? I'm totally fine with it. You know what I say to Bill? I say, Bill, welcome to the fight. You know what I say to Bill? I say, gooble gobble, we accept you. One of us. One of us, Bill. Bill Maher is criticizing segregated national anthems. Many of us have been talking about this kind of stuff for like a decade. And I suppose because we're not as well established, and maybe because we're all a bit younger and more active, we saw this coming. We called it out when it happened. And without the years of articles claiming we were all staunch defenders of liberalism, we all got called conservatives. And I'll tell you what happens. A lot of people like me in my political position, which is fairly politically homeless and center-left on policy, are called conservatives or right-wing. Now, they don't call me far-right, and they don't call me alt-right or anything like that. They've once or twice, but it's always been retracted. No, they just say Tim Pool is a right-wing YouTuber. That's the game they play. Now, it is challenging for them because, like, how do you have someone who, got their prominence from Occupy Wall Street being called right-wing? Somebody who routinely says universal health care is an ideal to strive for. Someone who is pro-choice. How is that all right-wing? It's not. It's not right-wing. But they're trying to shift the Overton window. The reality is, our political landscape is divided among people who don't pay attention and don't care, kind of like Bill Maher, and the people who do pay attention and do care. The media will lie to you left and right, claiming that in Oklahoma, gunshot victims are being turned away because too many people ate horse paste. Fake news. Now, stories that egregious are easily called out when real journalists, like Zed Jelani, for instance, calls up the local sheriff's department and says, y'all having gunshot victims turned away? And he was like, no. I think he said something like, this whole year we've had 2 victims and they were both fine, or something like that. You see, Bill Maher got Covington wrong because Bill Maher relies too heavily on people who don't fact check. So here's what happens. I see an article from CNN and it says something dumb. And if it's really dumb, it's really funny. Let me tell you something before we get into all this. There have been many stories that people on the right have fallen for. And we tend not to do that at Timcast. And I think the reason is if the story sounds outlandish or stupid and I can't verify it, I just don't cover it. There have been numerous instances where I'm like, oh, yeah, everybody kind of piled on that story and it wasn't true. Sometimes I'll see it and I'll outright just be like, yo, that's not true. I don't have any off the top of my head good examples, but there's an example right now where they're like, this one's less the case, but it's like Joe Biden incoherently rambles at an event, about Trump. I ignore these things because I listen to the video and Joe Biden isn't rambling incoherently. He's just kind of nonchalantly blasing through the conversation like, Trump, what's he talking about? In Florida, Robert E. Lee winning, I don't know, whatever. And I'm like, that's not incoherent rambling. That's him just being like, I don't know and don't care. So it's things like that happen that people on the right will jump onto. And then often, not often, but every so often, well, here we have Bill Maher finally starting to wake up to this. Now, I'll stress it again. The reason why this story is significant is not because Bill Maher is once again calling out the left, but Bill now is at the point where he has called out the left so much. They're calling him alt-right, him far-right, him libertarian, big L libertarian, and he's being forced to address the criticism. Bill, why do you keep swinging left? You're supposed to be a liberal. And Bill's like, I'm not giving up on liberalism. Hey, neither am I. Like traditional and classical liberalism, right? That's not conservatism, is it? I'll tell you this. Bill Maher, in many ways, is politically and policy-wise further right than I am. And that's always been the case. I'm actually idealistically, like my political compass is rather far left. Just because there are certain policy positions that I would prefer or like doesn't mean I think they're possible to implement right now. Meaning, you could come to me and say, Tim, we could do universal health care if we do these things. I'll be like, I'd like universal health care. I don't know if what you're saying makes sense. That won't lead to that. Furthermore, so long as y'all crazy racists are trying to create racially segregated healthcare systems, I'm not going to give you that power. You see how the system works? And that creates the impasse of perhaps left libertarianism is just a pipe dream. Maybe that's the case. You would, in order to get to a position where you'd have like functioning left libertarianism, you need a monoculture. So maybe it works really well in small, tightly knit groups, or, truth be told, religiously homogenous communities. Right now in America, not in a great American melting pot. Here's what they say about Bill Maher. Bill Maher of the Daily Mail. Bill Maher took aim at the NFL for playing Lift Every Voice and Sing, otherwise known as the Black National Anthem. The Real Time with Bill Maher host warned that having two different national anthems based on race was a slippery slope to segregation, but under a different name, he said. Quote, I think when you go down a road where you're having two different national anthems, colleges have different graduation ceremonies for black and white separate dorms. This is what I mean. Segregation, Maher said on his Friday show. Maybe we should get rid of our national anthem, but I think we should have one national anthem, he said. You see, therein lies the problem with Bill. Maybe we should get rid of our national anthem. No. We don't change the national anthem. We talk about what it meant and why it's important to us. A story about raising the flag and refusing to let it fall. But I'll tell you, I'll point out something really funny. I don't know the exact ratings for Bill Maher. I think he gets around 1 million on his show. And I would need to check his online ratings, but I'm fairly sure that the Timcast.com network and this show substantially decimates, like just blows Bill Maher's ratings out of the water. I can tell you that it's also a volume thing. I'm not saying I'm more influential. That's the point I'm getting to. Is Bill Maher substantially more influential than I and many others, simply by being around for as long as he is. And this is the interesting thing. Why is there a news article being written about Bill Maher saying something you and I and everybody else have been saying for months or for years? I mean, as long as they've been doing the anthem thing. I mean, if you want to get into the culture war stuff, we've been talking about this for years. Even when I would get 500,000 to 1 million views on a segment from Timcast IRL, which we often do, it doesn't make it to the papers. And maybe that's a good thing. Keeps the heat turned down on us. Go yell about Bill Maher. But I wonder, Bill Maher is not only less influential than, say, probably Styx Hexenhammer and Steven Crowder and Dave Rubin, but he's late to the party, too. And I think those things play together. Why is it that Bill Maher doesn't get like the same ratings for one volume? He does one show a week. Okay, I can accept that. Getting about 1 million views per episode. I don't know what his ratings are right now, but during the election, Timcast IRL was getting more than 1 million per night. No joke. This is how the media works. Simply because he's older and people have heard of him over a long period of time, they highlight what he says. Now, ultimately, I think this can be a good thing. Check this out. He says, when people say to me, boy, you go after the left a lot these days. Why? I'm like, because you're embarrassing me. That's why I'm going after the left in a way you never did before. I'm not going to give up on being liberal, he continued. You're taking children and making them hyper aware of race in a way they wouldn't otherwise be. The historically black university, Florida's A&M concert choir, joined keys for Thursday's performance of Every Voice and Sing, the Black National Anthem. The song had already blah, blah, blah. We get it. They play the Black National Anthem. And I guess that's the gist of the Bill Maher portion of this. Well, like I said, I want to say to Bill Maher, gooble, gobble, one of us. If you get the reference, it's from a very old movie. I can't remember the name of the movie. I reference it a lot. What's it from? It's from like Freaks or something, I think it's called. And this woman is at the table and they're all dancing, going, gooble, gobble, one of us. Bill Maher, please don't be late to the party. I wonder, he has a lot of people on his show. I wonder how much of what Bill Maher is willing to say is based on feedback he gets. Because certainly Bill Maher could just Google search much of this stuff. I don't think Bill Maher has created a new opinion of segregation. He just wasn't paying attention to it happening across the country because he probably just turns on CNN, hears scuttlebutt. This is a really fascinating change that's happening, right? Something is happening in the United States. It's dramatic. It's changing our culture. And there's a lot of reasons why it's happening. Some say immigration, perhaps. Some say universities, perhaps. Some say social media. I believe social media is the reason for this. Let me show you this story. And Bill, I hope you see this one. Syracuse professor is accused of defending 9/11 with claim it was an attack on heteropatriarchal capitalistic systems that many white Americans fight to protect. Wow, that's a whole lot of psychobabble garbage nonsense. How did all this happen? Well, I'm glad to be able to have. I'm glad these stories exist with Bill Maher because I think it provides evidence to my hypothesis about algorithmic psychosis along with this story. You probably heard me talk about it before. It does bear repeating, and I hope you share this with people. Not necessarily this video. I mean, yeah, share the video, like, subscribe, all that stuff, but tell people this. Try to, maybe we should write up an article, like a big article breaking down what's happening so that you guys can share it. I know I'm going to tell you this. You might understand it. It'll be really hard for you to like repeat perfectly to someone. But I think this story right here is a perfect example. And I think what's happening with Bill Maher is a perfect example. I bring you back to 2006. Facebook, MySpace is dwindling. Facebook's on the rise. And the algorithmic timeline emerges. It used to be that if you posted something on Facebook, people would see it when you posted it. But then Facebook realized that most people had too many friends, and so they weren't seeing half the stuff. And some of the stuff was good stuff that would keep them on the website longer. So Facebook said, let's make an algorithm that can select for what is more likely to keep someone on the site and show them that. Basically, if someone likes it, let's show it to them. Let's show them less of what they don't like, more of what they do like. Big mistake. What ends up happening is videos of police brutality and shocking rage content tend to do better because people interact with it more. The algorithm then started feeding this to people, creating a feedback loop of insanity. You now have people who believe that cops go around hunting down black people. Why? Because for this period, at the end of the 2000s into the 2010s, videos of police brutality were just gangbusters in the algorithm. People would just see it, they would get angry, and rightly so, and they would like it and share it, and it would get so much traffic that industries emerged around this. Facebook has tried to curtail this a little bit, but it's too late. The algorithms incentivize businesses to emerge around enraging people with fringe narratives. What percent of, how many people in I think it was 2019 were unarmed black men? How many unarmed black men were killed by cops? I think the Wall Street Journal has it at 19. It's a serious problem. But out of 375 million interactions with cops, that's a microscopic fraction. Certainly, we should highlight injustice. We should criticize it. But the media, social media algorithms were built to monetize all of this. So media organizations started just slamming people with the most insane news and insane narratives. And what happens when there's no news? You got to make an op-ed. Here's the best part. Websites like Kotaku. Kotaku is a video game website. But there's only so much you can write about video games. How many video games came out this year? Well, Grand Theft Auto isn't coming out anymore. They just keep remaking it. It's effectively an MMORPG at this point. So, with no new games to be released, what do you write about? You've done your tutorials. You've announced the new releases. You've put in an op-ed about the gameplay. We need content to justify why you're here. Otherwise, we won't make enough money. So, what do? Opinion pieces. Mario's racist. There you go. Now you're getting, you might ask yourself, why did so many articles come out about video games being racist? It's simple and sexist. That's what played well in the algorithms. So all of a sudden, things that had nothing to do with racism were justifiably, were being justified as something to do with racism. All of a sudden, you have movie articles coming out and they claim, it's intersectionality. That was just used to justify why an article about the latest cheese flavor from Wisconsin was actually a racist dog whistle to the alt-right. Why milk is racist. Why the OK hand sign is racist. Because they were like, this is the stuff that plays well. People click it. They like it. So let's make everything about it. People's clothes, people's smiles, people's jokes, people's laughs, food. There you go. Something else happened too. You see, early on with the internet, it allowed weirdos to coalesce around being weirdos. In the early days of the internet, it was a free-for-all. And communities that couldn't normally come together were now able to. When the mainstream started entering the digital space, these spaces were already dominated by weirdo groups. So when you come online and you go onto Facebook, You're like, hey, I like football and sports, and I support the troops. Let's go into Facebook and post, I support the troops. Too late. There's already 1,000 people who are psychotic, weirdo, leftist cultists screaming at you. And now all of a sudden you're like, oh, I didn't mean it. I don't like those troops. Oh, yeah. Now as for Bill Maher. To provide more evidence to my hypothesis, perhaps I should write this down and submit it to a scholarly journal. Bill Maher is too old for the internet. He doesn't use it the same way we do. He's not particularly online. Sam Harris, for instance, isn't either, and you can see how these people are affected by it. Older groups that still get their news from scuttlebutt and from television and from the paper. And I mean that figuratively, not literally, like they go to the New York Times to read their articles and they don't do investigations. They don't research. They don't know anything about this stuff. They're late to the party. Look at Sam Harris being like, I'm eating these words one syllable at a time when he was quoting himself and voting for Joe Biden. Bro, we all knew. We're plugged in to the info webs. All right. So we get all this information fast. Bill Maher is like 5 years late to the party because he's still getting all his information from archaic sources. His opinions don't change. And you see, therein lies my point. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Jon Stewart on his new show when he's coming back. Jon Stewart went on CBS. He went on with Colbert. And he said he promoted lab leak theory, saying it seems to make sense. And Colbert argued against him. Jon Stewart's not hyper online. These liberal dudes who don't use the internet are not falling into the trap of the left and the insanity, and they don't know what's going on with them. Now, certainly there are many people who have younger staff, who is pushing them in these directions. But I think it's funny when Bill Maher can come out and say the things he says, and I'm like, if Bill used Twitter, he'd have been saying this stuff well before I was. He'd have been saying this stuff well before you were. Many more people would have awakened to it. We probably wouldn't have Donald Trump. We probably wouldn't have Hillary Clinton. Honestly, don't know what would have happened. I mean, maybe it would have been Trump still, to be honest. Because if Bill Maher, Trump may have won by even more votes. In fact, I believe if Bill Maher was actively paying attention to what was going on, he's talking about lift every voice and sing. Yo, that was 2 years ago. We were talking about all this stuff. I think Bill Maher would have voted for Trump. I absolutely believe it. How much of what Bill Maher believes about Trump is a lie? Probably most of it. Is Trump a nasty guy? Oh, one of the worst. Is he a man of bad moral character? Well, not the worst, I would say, in moral character, but he's kind of bad for a lot of reasons. He's a mean guy. Did he do right by a lot of people for a really long time? Yep, he won awards for it, too. Do his staff members love him? They do. I went to Trump Tower on more than one occasion. I asked the people who work there, and they say they love him. He comes down. When Trump would come down, he'd be like, let's get all the staff together. I heard this story more than once. He would get all the staff at his hotel, and he would walk out handing out $100 bills to everybody. Tax-free gifts. Just, this is for you. Just for you. It's for no reason. Just thanks. Have a nice day. I don't know if it's actually a tax-free gift. He's their boss. But people loved him. I went to the ice cream shop, and I was like, you ever see him? Oh, yeah, he comes down every so often. Do you like him? Oh, he's great. He always puts a $100 bill in the tip jar. Winning awards for. But you look at his personality, you look at his character, and he's a nasty guy. He is. And I think it's fair to say. I also think it's fair to say he made tremendous mistakes with foreign policy. I think it's fair to say he made tremendous mistakes with who he hired. But is he as bad as Biden or Hillary? I will take the potty mouth, mean guy over the corrupt neo-lib, neocon uniparty establishment any day of the week. You see, Bill Maher doesn't get it. I suppose it's, Bill Maher he's like basically twice my age. And I think it's interesting to see that like a lot of people who grew up through more, the older people, they grew up experiencing a bunch of different administrations. And so they probably have a different perspective. But we haven't had a person like Trump. I mean, maybe you can say Reagan or something, but I don't think he's much like Trump at all. I'm a millennial. We went through multiple economic crises. We're sick of the Federal Reserve. We're sick of the establishment uniparty. We're sick of the wars. We're sick of the lies from the cultural establishment, from the cathedral. And Trump was he was the bull storming through the doors. I'll take it. Bill Maher's the guy who's like, I'm comfortable. Please don't rock the boat. And I'm like, bro, millennials are staring down the barrel of no property ownership, stagnant wages, and they're mad about it. Boomers control a disproportionate amount of wealth, and for this, you are getting the rise of Bernie Sanders and the rise of Trump. We ain't going to be sitting back for this. We are fed up. Now, a lot of these younger leftists get caught in the trap, and the Democrats convince them to vote against their own interests for people like Biden, a corrupt bankster, crony capitalist. Trump is bad for a lot of reasons, but he was not the establishment, and everything they did proves it. They hated that guy. And now here we are, thanks to people like Bill Maher who didn't pay attention, who's now coming out realizing that, maybe he's going to have to keep criticizing the left. And then what? Are they going to call Bill Maher right-wing? Bill Maher's opinions on policies, in many ways, many areas, further right than mine. And that to me is shocking, that they would claim Bill Maher is a liberal and then try and claim that I'm right-wing. When there was one smear who's like, Tim Pool regularly promotes universal health care, but as if that changes the fact that he's routinely making fun of Democrats. And I'm like, it's really funny, isn't it? There are a lot of leftists who do just that. The real issue is I call out the lies. Take a look at people like Vosh or Hassan. They're pro-government authority. Is that the only real difference between our positions? They will just outright bash Trump for things Trump had nothing to do with for tribal points, and they'll support the authority, the vax mandates. And then I'm like, okay, we have Vosh on the show. And it's funny because Vosh's fans are like, they actually agree on a lot of things. And I'm like, hey, how about that? The only problem is I'm anti-authoritarian. I'm anti-violence. I'm pro people living in peace and respecting freedom. And yet here we are. Hassan and Vosh are the ones coming out cheering for a vaccine mandate with no medical exemptions. So what? That's the big difference. Bill, if you believe in freedom and you actually believe in these values, you need to start paying attention. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.